Now we're going to head over to growth. So let's get started. So I'm going to start by asking you a question. What do you think is the percentage of companies that actually grow? Throw me a number. How many percentage of companies do you think actually grow? 40. 40%? Oh, you're generous. We should talk a little bit more. No, not it. No, keep going. 10. Keep going. 6%. Keep going. So, the next slide I'm going to show you, I hope it doesn't depress any of you. In the United States, there are 32 million companies registered. Only 1% of them make $1 million and more a year. 1% of them make $1 billion a year, and 4.5% of them are super scale companies, startups that are worth $1 billion plus. Now, don't let this be misleading in any way. Growth, in many ways, actually is a lot more unique than you think. But when you start to understand the growth patterns, you're going to start to identify what kind of growth the different organizations you're working with are having. We're going to identify the 4 different patterns on how growth actually works and what the implications of them are. But I always like to start here because we understand what this looks in the bigger picture. Okay? When it comes to growth, we have two areas that are on 2 ends of the spectrum. We have incremental growth and we've got hyper growth, right? So we're going to just keep this model in mind as we go through. So when we take a look at the different growth patterns based on that one specific model, you're going to have 4 types of growth patterns. Those that are non-exponential and those that are exponential. 80% of companies grow incrementally. Every year they look at growing at 3%, 5%, right? They just keep it going, go a little bit more. Although the absolute number at the end might be huge, their mindset, their capability, their structure, their strategy, their talent is all towards incremental ability, and they stay right there. Progressive leap are organizations that start incrementally and then have some form of a transformation, and then they start to progressively grow but still do not achieve hypergrowth. 4% are transformational leap, which start with no growth. They start incremental, then they shift into incremental, and then all of a sudden have hypergrowth. 1% of companies, which are super scale companies, which are those 390 companies that I use as an example, have 0 growth, not even incremental, and then they have hypergrowth all of a sudden. Now you're probably asking me, how the hell is that possible? So I'm going to point you to a book. If you haven't read it already, it's called Hooked. Hooked explains this mechanic in a wonderful level of detail to understand how a company goes from absolutely nothing and getting on the radar screen. It is equivalent to the idea that you didn't know what Instagram was. You wake up one morning, you learn about Instagram, and you find out there's 1 billion users, and you ask yourself, how the hell did that happen, and how did I not hear of such a thing? Those are hypergrowth companies. So when you look at this, there is a bit of a confusion in one area, and I'm going to make it very clear to you. When you look at the transitional and progressive leap, they have something in common. And the thing that they have in common is a change that takes place. It could be a re-injection of capital, a re-injection of talent, a change in strategy, they get rid of some business units, they invest in new areas, they completely transform their structure. But they stay on the same growth pattern and not the same growth pattern, but they change the way that they actually do it. Why there's a lot of confusion here when I work with a lot of my clients? They want to be exponential, but they really think, and structure to be only incremental in growth because they are unable to work and think on how a hypergrowth company would. Now, I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong. That's not how this is supposed to be laid out. Everybody grows differently. And when you go back and you look at your clients and you start to understand which growth pattern they work in, you'll start to understand how you can actually work and collaborate with them a lot better so that you can work within the growth patterns they have and try to transition them to the next one. So now I'm going to break down this spectrum and give you a little bit more detail into it. So I'm going to start at the very top. We're going to look at these 6 things here are what I call superpowers, okay? And these superpowers have 2 things on the spectrum that will make an organization either incremental or a hypergrowth company. A company that is trying to achieve speed, that is incremental, try to use less processes. Companies that are hypergrowth have no process. Example, Amazon, one-click purchase. Companies that look at costs that are incremental, they try to do things cheaper. Companies that have hypergrowth do it for free. Google. When you look at ease, companies that are incremental, they do it through efficiency and optimization. Companies that have hypergrowth, zero friction. Spotify. When you look at change, there are companies that follow, and there are companies that define. Okay? Companies like Apple. Culture. Companies that transform. Companies that create movement. Lululemon. Companies that use tech. So technology companies that use tech. Companies that create tech. Tesla. Those are examples of hyper-growth companies versus those that are incremental. When you take these 6 elements, okay, so we've got these 6 superpowers that we've just identified, and you're probably thinking, okay, well, what does that mean to me? What does that mean to my client, right? So the objective here is that I want you to think about your own personal growth. I want you to think about how you bring that to your client and how you bring that to GT. So for the lack of better examples, I'm going to give you an idealistic situation that you can draw on. Every company will have one primary superpower. It's just like in the cartoons, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, whatever one of these superheroes you like, you will notice that they have one superpower, one primary superpower. It's the same thing with an individual, it's the same thing with an organization, a single superpower. Now in an idealistic situation, they may have a supporting superpower. So in this case, let's say the primary superpower is speed, but the supplement or the supporting one would be cost and ease, and their tertiary powers would be change, culture, and tech. Now, I've laid this out for the sake of example with all of them, but what you'll find that your superpower or your client's superpower or GT's superpower is actually one. And if you're only good at one, that is actually an excellent thing because you become extremely focused and powerful once you are aware and identify what that one single superpower is.